take it away.
All right. Thank you, Jason. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for tonight's or today's presentations, the first in a 5-week series called Say What You Want to Say. My name is Julia Dean, and I'm the founder and executive director of the Los Angeles Center of Photography. Soon, I will introduce Ali Leroy, our moderator, who will then introduce our guests, Quasi and Laurent. But first, I would like to tell you a few things about LACP and the people behind it, a team we at LACP are most grateful to have. I'll start with Brandon Gannon. Raise your hand, Brandon, and wave your hand. Where are you? Who runs the show around here with the great help of Sarah Hadley. Sarah, Kevin Weinstein, I'm not sure that he's here tonight. Janice McGavin, Janice is here, wave your arms. And Jason, who you've already met, who's producing this event. I would also like to point out any members of our board of directors who might be here. I didn't see who everybody was, so I'm not sure if I've missed somebody, but our board of directors are so important to us, and they're such dear friends and such great help to us. We've been around now for more than 21 years. In the beginning, I was the only teacher, but we've grown over the years, and now we offer 150 classes a year at LACP and online. We host webinars every Saturday, a monthly event called Inside Photographers, and so much more. The pandemic has not slowed us down, but it has certainly challenged us. Luckily, we're still here with the help of our donors, grants, and members, who we call our friends. Becoming a member is a great way to support LACP for only $95 a year, or half that if you're a student, veteran, or if you live out of the state. Another great way to donate is to sign up for smile.amazon.com or something like that. Anyway, it's a really neat thing where if you buy a lot of Amazon stuff, they give a portion to your nonprofit of choice, and that could be us. So we're all signed up. So you just have to pull down the scroll, and there we are, and we get a little portion of what you just bought. Lastly, I'd like to tell you about our big online fundraiser that is scheduled for October 24th. We've hired a skilled production team to produce a wonderful online fundraising gala. Our theme is a love letter to LA. One of the highlights of the fundraiser is when we show 50 images selected from our competition, The Connected World 2020. It is free to enter, and the winners will get international exposure. The deadline is, I think, Sarah, August 31st? It's the end of August. Okay, and you all must enter. It's free. Now is the time to introduce tonight's moderator, Ali Leroy, who I am proud to call a friend, fellow street photographer, and board member of LACP. Ali Leroy has an impressive background in the comedy scene in an earlier time period of his life, and now as an A-list television writer, director, and producer. He's worked closely with Bernie Mac, Chris Rock, Ice Cube, Tyler Perry, and LeBron James. He's won 1 and has been nominated for 5 Emmys. He's won 2 NAACP Image Awards, been nominated for a Golden Globe, and has been recognized by AFI for his outstanding achievements in television. This information about Ali is what you can find by doing research on him. What I'd like to tell you about him is what a wonderful presence he adds to any group. I met Ali Leroy as a street photographer before I knew anything else about him. When people tell me they think their 5'11" size makes it difficult to take good pictures on the street, I show them pictures by Ali, who is 6'4", and with his good looks, very noticeable. Yet he isn't noticeable when taking pictures. So Ali, please introduce your friends. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. That was very, very kind. Wow. Yeah, I just always want to say thank you to Julia. She's been really like a true guiding light for me in my work, and has really helped to point me in the direction of a bunch of other incredibly talented artists. And so because of that, I'm really happy today to be able to talk to a couple of men that I've met, in this space. And so I guess we're going to do one after the other. And so while one of you guys stands down and listens, but before we do that, I just want to introduce you both, and then we'll go first up with Quasi Boyd. Is it Bolden or Bolden?
Quasi Boyd Bolden.
Bolden. All right, so that's Quasi Boyd Bolden, incredible street photographer. But we'll talk a little bit more about the focus of his work and how he goes about it. And where are you, Laurent Chevalier? You someplace? Did I get that correct?
Right here.
Are
pretty
you
good.
holding a screaming child hostage? What's going on over there?
Try to keep these Brooklyn sounds out.
Right. Another incredible street photographer just had a book out recently called Enough. So we're going to start out with Quasi. And well, first, can you tell us a little bit about your practice, a little bit about how you got started in your work, and talk about some of the work you're going to be showing us today.
Okay, thanks a lot, Ali. As you said, my name is Quasi Boyd Bolden. I'm a documentary landscape and street photographer from Los Angeles. I've lived here my whole life since I was 2, originally born in Brooklyn, but my family relocated very early. And pretty much I fell into photography just living in Los Angeles. I bounced around a little bit as a younger person. I lived in Hollywood, I lived in Mid-City, and then lived in Koreatown. Grew up skateboarding, doing graffiti, all the LA normal things that someone did in the 90s. But one of the things that always was very large in my mind was, I felt very attached to Los Angeles, and it's a very personal space for me. And it, whatever sort of expression that I had, whether it was like hip hop or drawing or skateboarding or whatever, I always felt that people didn't necessarily see the city the way that I saw it. That was always one of the driving motivations for my creativity was, me and my friends lived in this world, we existed in this space, we lived out these lives that when people thought of Los Angeles, they didn't necessarily think of us. They thought of other things. They thought of movies. They thought of the entertainment industry. They thought of, surfer kids in Venice. They didn't think about a ragtag group of skateboarders in Hollywood. But that's what we were. And, that's kind of where that seed was planted. And, over the years, it kind of developed. I got into photography pretty heavily after my father passed away. He left me a camera, and that's kind of where that grew. And I didn't get serious about it until my, early 20s. But, I was blessed to be around some really other talented photographers that I worked with and stuff like that. And we were able to turn it into something. So yeah, that's basically my origin. That's my origin story.
So tell me very quickly, what was this camera that your dad left you?
Yeah. I honestly started all of my photography on an Olympus Pen F half frame camera. And I had a 40 millimeter Zuko lens, and that was it. Initially that was how I learned all the manual settings. That's how I would get 72 shots per 36 exposure roll. So, me being broke, I would go get a 12 exposure roll because then I got 24, and then I would save on the processing. And that was my hustle. And then I got really lucky. My older brother, saw that I was really getting serious about photography, and he asked me what kind of cameras I like. And I was like, okay, well, I'm like, I like Leica, I like Contax. I'm just throwing out names. And this was the 90s. And so he went to a pawn shop and he picked me up a Contax T2 for $40.
Wow.
Yeah. and honestly, that camera is my main camera. It's still my main film camera. I've been using it for over 15 years, and
wow.
Easily 80% of my portfolio is shot on that camera. And that's pretty much how I dived in. Once I realized what I had, once he gave it to me, and I was able to really nail down that the way it was used, it was kind of off to the races, especially for street and shooting around LA. It was a perfect tool.
Wow. Contax G2. You can't get those for $40 anymore.
No, you cannot.
If you can find one, it's gonna cost you.
Yeah, people think they're fancy now. Mine's is all beat up and stuff, and I love it. It's the best thing about it is that it's personalized.
So your practices, street and documentary and landscape. How do you move between those spaces? I'm most familiar with your landscape work, I haven't seen as much of your street work. So like where did you start, and then how did you come to focus so much on the landscape if that's where you really are focused now?
Yeah, no, I'm still, I mean, it's actually kind of become, combined a little bit, but the landscape is definitely, focusing on landscape is about 80% of my work. And it is definitely what I've been known for over the years. And that honestly started with skateboarding. I mean, that's pretty much the way that I got into the landscape. Wandering around and, basically looking for spots to skate, you start really analyzing every little aspect of the buildings that you're seeing in a way that I think that, people that pass by don't really look. So you notice stairs, you start noticing, these other elements. And honestly, that combined with the way that we would seek out spots in neighborhoods all over the city is really how that came together for me. I've always been attracted to landscape photography, but honestly, I lived in Los Angeles, so I didn't have really access to go to the mountains or anything like that. So I just shot what was in my area. That interest intersected with, the gentrification that was going on in Los Angeles. And I realized that the neighborhoods that were photographing were disappearing, especially Hollywood. Like, of all the places that I lived, my childhood revolved around Hollywood, even though I didn't live there the longest. I mean, I went to elementary school, junior high, I'm a product of Fairfax and Marshall High. Like, I'm definitely, based in that area. And so I saw from, the mid 90s up until now, just how much that place has transformed and how much of the place that I know is gone. And that's really been replicated throughout the city. So that was my focus early on. I got into street photography. I've always dabbled in it, and I've always had an interest. In fact, a buddy of mine, Luis Torres, is a dope street photographer. He's actually in the audience. He's one of my biggest influences with street photography, just keeping it a buck. But, when it really comes down to it, I didn't take it as something that I could put into my portfolio until I went to the New York, I got into the New York Times portfolio review a couple years back, and I had some time in the city. And honestly, it just clicked for me. I got some positive reviews and people liked my landscape work, and it was a great conversation. But the day after, I mean, it was spring in New York and it was a sunny day and I had a whole day to myself. So I'm just like, I'm gonna just do this. So that was the first time I really tried to kind of shoot in a more serious, focused way. That was about 3 years ago. And from that point, I went to Toronto, Philadelphia, of course, my own LA, and it kind of merged with my landscape to kind of show or depict a more, what I say, it's more a complete style. It's kind of an evolutionary step. I like to combine both of them to give a more complete picture of the neighborhoods I photograph.
So this is kind of interesting for me. We're talking about your influences because looking at your work, the first two people that really jumped out at me, and they're iconic enough, is William Christenberry and Stephen Shore, and I kind of felt like you have this marriage between that really sort of pristine survey style of Christenberry versus the more sort of, the Shore style is a little quirky. It's a lot more personal. It's infused with a lot more life. But what's interesting to me about your work is that you're bringing that to Black spaces. And when we were, kind of curating this group of artists for this exhibition, you stood out to me as singular because, in the space of street photography, there's a lot of effort and interest in the people, but Black spaces was a different kind of feel. And I'm just so influences wise, who kind of drew you to your style, and who did you study, or were those avenues that you went down?
No, that's a really great question. Honestly, there's one person, Stephen Shore is an enormous influence on my work. And honestly, so is William Eggleston. That's a very huge influence. But also Jamel Shabazz out of New York is just, he's basically one of the people that, I saw his work, I saw his book, A Time Before Crack, when I was just discovering photography. And the way that he photographed his neighborhood is one of the major influences on why I do what I do. Just because, kind of going back to what I was saying about how people didn't see LA the way me and my friends saw it, to be totally honest, you know, with Black spaces and all of the spaces I photograph, I make it a point to shoot places in LA that other people don't really shoot. I make it a point, you know, you can go now and go to Instagram and do LA street photography. And of course you'll find some gems because there are a ton of talented street photographers, but you'll also see a lot of the same places. You know, when tourists and people come, you'll see Hollywood Boulevard, you'll see downtown, you'll see these places which are worthy of being documented, but you don't really see mid-city. You're starting to see Leimert Park a lot because that's where people think they're like, oh, I'm gonna go to Leimert Park, but you know,
Right.
you can go around Leimert Park too. You can walk down Vernon, like you can do all of these things and just, you know, document these spaces in the same way that other neighborhoods are documented and elevated for in artistic, you know, tradition.
Right.
So that's kind of always been a focus of mine, is just to go to these spots that, like, you know, people just don't really go. And that's what I seek out whenever I travel, and especially when I'm in, you know, when I'm home.
Well, let's take a look at some of what you've been working on lately. Let's see what you got here, and maybe you can tell us, you know, how you come upon some of these places and what's striking you about the images. So.
Okay, 1 second, hold on. I'll have a short presentation.
I know.
And share. Okay. So this is actually one of the spots from the show. This is right in Mid-City, right off Washington and La Brea. This is actually, I love, the reason why I chose this picture, and the reason why, this is recent, this is during the pandemic, but one of the reasons why I love this picture is I've been looking for this place for a really long time because it's something from my memory as a childhood. So from my childhood. So basically, I used to live in Mid-City off Washington and Burnside, and I used to go to school in Hollywood, like I was saying, and my mom would pick me up and we would get fish from Rick's Fish Market. I mean, and this is like 25 years ago, you know, and I forgot where it was, and I thought it was torn down. And, you know, I was driving through the neighborhood and I drove by and I literally almost had an accident pulling over because I saw the signage, I saw the place, and it all came back to me. So that's the sort of thing that, you know, sometimes it's kind of a reaction, but I mean, this place is not necessarily iconic to a lot of people, but I'm telling you, when I posted this picture, I got so much of a response from people in the neighborhood because they know exactly why this place is relevant and it resonated with them. And in a lot of ways, like elevating that feeling, like that almost like local LA feeling, and kind of putting that on a bigger stage is one of the things that I really like doing. So that's what the story behind this picture is. I'll go through it.
Okay.
I promise I have more.
Is that a helicopter back there in the
it is.
air?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
a little ghetto bird happening.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's a, you know, Mid-City, still Mid-City. It's dope, but it's Mid-City.
Right.
Okay. All right. Okay, so these are some street photographs. This is actually from this weekend, Van Nuys. I live in the Valley now, and I really enjoy photographing the Valley because I feel like it's left out of the conversation in Los Angeles a lot, and there's a lot going on there, as there always has been. But, you know, I'm guilty of it as well. You know, when I was younger, that's kind of, I was focused on Central LA and this and that. And once I moved out to the Valley and really began to explore it, it really, you know, it's one of my favorite subjects. So this is Van Nuys. This is Van Nuys Boulevard right near Roscoe. And it really reminds me in a lot of ways of what I felt Los Angeles used to be like before, before actually all the money poured in and all the luxury apartments went up. You know, the Valley and Van Nuys and North Hollywood in particular remind me of a place that doesn't exist anymore in LA.
Can I ask you a quick question? I'm just interested in your use of bodies in your frame. I mean, it's definitely adding some life here. Can you go back a couple of frames to the other piece before the Walmart shot? Yes, this one. Like I love the, you know, there's a lot of energy in this shot. Is this sort of are you setting these up and kind of waiting? Are you shooting a few frames? How are you kind of approaching your inclusion of people and how you compose their, you know, their spaces inside the frame? How are you looking at that?
Honestly, it's pretty, you know, I like to walk and I like to just kind of like, I trust the moment. You know, I do spot scenes and I do, you know, scope out things from about half a block away. I love when I'm approaching the corner and I see a bus coming, because I know that there's going to be some action there. I know people are going to be getting off the bus or getting on or doing this. This is actually right here in front of a store called La Coracao. It's a department store, and it just opened up. And so everyone was waiting outside. And so I knew it was opening. I kind of saw that the door was lifting up and that there was a line. So I did kind of hang back. But to be totally honest, I go through and I look for these interesting juxtapositions, because I'm not really a straight on street photographer. There are people that are directly like, I'm going to take a picture of you in the street. I'm more taking a picture of the scene. So with me, and that's kind of how it connects to the landscape also. I mean, even the Van Nuys Boulevard sign, the stuff in that, like, these are all elements I consider. And so that's almost just as important to me as the body framing. So for me, I don't take a couple shots. I do walk through, but I do have a plan of kind of the directions I'm going to go and the spots I'm going to get as I walk through these crowds and through these elements, and I arrange it like that.
Oh, great. Let's see that Walmart shot, the next one.
Okay, hold on.
Now, this one has, barely, and it's very geometric. And what kind of jumps out to you when you're shooting this type of?
Well, honestly, with this, I mean, this is just pure composition. And, sometimes you see, that composition of color and of these hard lines. And I do have a thing, I've noticed I've had a recent fascination with corners and the different angles that you can catch corners and get the foreground and the background. And so, like, that sense of depth is something I'm always going for. But also, to be honest, I mean, I actually shot this weekend. This is super recent. And the Walmart has, I have a ton of frames with this Walmart in the background, but with everything going on in our country right now, it just seemed like something I should be documenting. I mean, the thing about this mini mart, or this mall, this place where I'm shooting at, is that there's a Dollar Tree, there's a pawn shop, and there's a CVS. And then they're all deserted because you can't really go into any of them. And then you have the Walmart over there, and it's just an interesting time we're living in. So I just felt like, the Walmart sign, it was kind of what drew me to this picture, but also at the same time, like, the around the corner and the geometry just kind of fell together the closer I lined it up.
Yeah, sure. So let's look at a few more.
Okay, this is my, Wilshire in Vermont, Koreatown, which is a place I'm very familiar with. This one right here, same area, same on Vermont. I've always had a fascination with bus stops and with public transportation. I just recently got a car because, I'm a father now, so I got to transport my daughters to places. But before that, I was 100% public transportation, because I feel like it's one of the only true ways to experience the city on a ground level. I mean, just taking the act of taking the bus, the act of waiting at the bus stops, it's always been something that's been inspiring to me. So, and especially right now, it's one of the best ways to document just kind of what's going on in Los Angeles. So this is one of my favorite shots from the set I have with you all.
Great.
Let's see. This is more of my standard fare. This is North Hollywood. And honestly, sometimes you just see pretty things. There's not a lot to this picture, man. I mean, honestly, like, I was walking down the street and this tree struck me. It was in full bloom and it just popped, and I just felt like I just had to take a picture of it. So, I mean, that's, and honestly, that sentiment is something that I think, does resonate in my work too. And you were talking about photographing, Black spaces and all spaces in general. Is I do see the beauty in almost every type of neighborhood. Because it's there, and the beauty comes from the way that people who live there construct their lives in the places that they reside. And that's something that I feel like is underappreciated, because people are always looking for idealized versions of things. They're looking for an idealized version of a building, or I need to have a fancy this or that. But honestly, especially as a child, these are the places that I felt the most comfortable in. And, as an adult, like, taking, documenting them, I get a lot out of it.
And this is all with the G2. You're still shooting everything?
Oh, no.
Okay, what are you shooting with now?
I wish I had I honestly wish I had the time and the money to shoot as much film as I used to. But also because it's a T2, not G2, T2, so it's the tiny one.
T2,
Yeah. But because I've had it for so long, I use it sparingly. And I normally shoot, I'll go through a phase where I'll shoot film for like a month and a half, and that'll be my film almost for the year. Right now I shoot with pretty much with exclusively Fuji stuff. I have a Fuji X70, their small compact from a couple years ago, which is a slept-on gem. It's one of the best cameras that they ever made. And then I also have a Fuji X-T2, and I got their 27 millimeter lens, which is another slept-on gem. And those are pretty much my go-tos. I have a wide angle that I barely use, but 40 millimeter is pretty much, or 40 millimeter equivalent is pretty much where I feel most comfortable in. So that's kind of where most of these shots are from.
You're like a 40 millimeter guy. I like that. I love the 40 millimeters.
I mean, I don't understand why people just don't give it the respect it deserves. To be totally honest, I just feel like it's 35 is great, but it's a little too wide, and 50 is a little too tight. I mean, 40 just gives it that breathing room that separates it. And especially with street, that's the whole. I feel like I can ramble on about the 40 millimeter. I should get a T-shirt.
I love your colors and your composition here.
Thank you. Yeah, I love this building. I mean, I have a ton of pictures of this building. It's right on the corner of Pico and Arlington, where Wilton becomes Arlington. So right as you start heading south, and it's a church, and that mural and this building, it's just beautiful. So this is definitely my favorite picture I've gotten of it, but I really have probably about 12 pictures of this building over the past couple of years. I'm addicted to it.
Well, let's look at one more before we move on to Laurent for a few minutes. So show me one more thing that you love.
Let me see. One more thing. This one right here. All right. So one of the projects I've been working on is a site called The Public Work. I also have a Instagram account with it, and I was actually featured in the New York Times over the weekend for it. And basically what The Public Work is documenting the pandemic on a street level in Los Angeles. And so that's kind of been my mission. That's how I've been getting through this current period, is going out and looking for things that specifically resonate. And this photograph here, I mean, honestly, this is from a couple months ago. This is when people were still kind of sparsely on the street. They were just reemerging, selling masks and stuff. And, when that was going on, it felt like it was going to go on forever. Then it stopped, and now it's gone. And people are pretty much out in a large way. So that's one of the reasons this is one of my favorite pictures I've taken, because I feel like it reflects that moment in time.
Wow. All right. So we'll come back and talk to you a little bit more and maybe ask some questions. Let's move on to Laurent. Where are you? Give up that share screen. Quasi's going to let us see other people. Laurent, where are you? You there? There you are.
You hear me there?
Did you tie that baby up?
All should be quiet for now.
All right, everybody. It's Laurent Chevalier. So, sir, I mean, we've come to be acquainted through some mutual friends, but I bought your book. I saw some of the work. I loved it. We'll talk about that in a minute. But just tell us a little bit about how you got into the craft and what your focus is, and then we'll get into it.
Yeah. So it's funny. Actually, I was born in Los Angeles County, over in Bellflower. So it's really cool to be able to kind of be associated and bring some work back to the West, back to the Best Coast, even if it is digitally. But yeah, so I was born in LA, and I grew up actually outside of Washington, or outside of Seattle in Washington, and we kind of bounced around when I was a kid. So we were like sort of all over the place in Washington, and I think that kind of was a bit foundational in how my work ultimately ended up shaping. Because I ended up being very observational. I was always kind of the new guy in whatever space I was in. So I was always kind of like sitting back, taking in the scene and trying to learn from the things around me. So that ended up being very foundational. And then when I was in college, I originally was a journalism major. And so that was actually my first foray into photography. Was I would start shooting just pictures for the things I was writing, shooting the stories. So it came from a very like photojournalistic approach. But then I took a history of photography class, and that was what really sparked my first steps into really learning the craft and the history and the idea of the body of work. So I think those three things were very foundational in sort of how my work has progressed, being very observational outsider in a sort of way. The idea of a body of work and something fitting into a historical context, and then also the idea of like this journalistic reportage element, but also the idea that a story is shaped by that, and it's never really objective, you know. So that's definitely a foundation of where I started from.
You know, I think it'd be oversimplifying to talk about, you know, the influences perhaps of Parks on your work. I mean, I clearly see that, and you know, maybe even like a Dawood Bey.
Hmm.
But a lot of your work, to me, reminds me of Helen Levitt, who
Hmm.
shot a ton of stuff in the '50s. Just it feels immediate. It feels very personal. Like it when I'm looking at your work, it does feel like you're of the space and not just a visitor. I mean, I know you talk about the journalistic aspect of it, but it really feels like you know the spaces. There's a great degree of comfort and sort of intimacy to the work. So, you know, maybe you can tell me just a little bit about, you know, some of your influences and you know how it's kind of shaped what you've been doing.
Yeah. As far as influences, I think the first, probably biggest influence was definitely Robert Frank, and just his way of being in and around a moment and capturing it without necessarily seeking the perfection of the moment. And he wasn't, I feel like he wasn't always seeking the beauty in the moment, that he was more about what is really here and what can I show you that's here. And then the most recent and probably the strongest is Roderick Rava. And there's a certain tenderness that I feel like comes across with his images, particularly of his neighborhood, his community, the people he's surrounded by. And the idea of being able to be in, around, and show the stories in the space is what I found really beautiful. That's been inspiring to me between those two individuals' work greatly so.
How long? So when you go out to shoot, is it are you going out with mission to definitely make images, or are you, you know, just kind of, you know, carrying your camera with you, and when you're happening upon things, or is it some balance between the two?
I'm somebody that tries to keep it with me all the time, just trying to stay ready so I don't have to get ready, kind of thing, you know.
Right,
um,
right.
and I rarely go out to shoot. Like I rarely am like, okay, I'm going to go step out. I'm going to go here to this location and capture images. I'm really much more of a, I guess in a way, transient photographer, in that I'm capturing moments as I'm navigating my own life, kind of thing. So it's everything that I'm usually capturing is moments in which I find myself for some natural reason. It's environments that I'm comfortable with. You know, it's either a commute. You know, I work in the city, so it's just on my way to work, keep my camera with
Yeah.
me, be on the train, walk into the train, that sort of thing. Take a lunch break, just be around the office, something like that. So it's very much just what's the space around me and what can I learn from that space.
So do you find yourself having any of these you know, I haven't been out on the street to shoot for a while, and sometimes I get the sense like I'm not doing anything. So I mean, and Quasi, I think my interpretation of his work is that he's incredibly prolific. I mean, I see him out and shooting in about, like, it feels like all the time. It makes me feel like a slacker.
Right.
So I mean, is that a pressure you put on yourself? Is that something you just don't think about, or?
You know, I think I go between, because sometimes I look and I see, maybe I'll see somebody like a Quasi or somebody else out there, and I'm like, man, they've really been out there. And I've been either just
Right.
doing something else or I haven't gone anywhere. But then I realized that I think for me, the images that people resonate with the most and the ones that I feel the most connected to are ones that I've been able to create in very sort of natural spaces. And so I think that giving myself sort of the grace to be able to work in the spaces in which I need to be and which I find myself has given me ability to not put too much pressure on myself in that respect. It's like, okay, work where you need to work and work where you need to be, and like the work will manifest itself to you, kind of thing.
And you're in Brooklyn now? You're living?
I'm in Brooklyn, yeah, yep. So I
How
moved to
long you been
Brooklyn
there?
in 2007.
Okay.
So
You find it a rich environment to work in? I mean, you know, I died to shoot in New York.
it is.
How is it for
I
you?
mean, it truly is. I think because I moved to New York in 2006 for law school, And that was a time that I actually really was kind of sparked. I've been shooting for a while, but it was very much more on and off, kind of sporadic, kind of thing. But being in New York, I think really sparked the energy of like, okay, this is something I can glean from. This is something I can learn from. And there are a lot of stories here that are worth sharing for people to see, both in New York and outside of New York. I think there's a lot for people to be able to like learn and see from, kind of thing.
Let's look at some of the work, man. So let's see what you're working with. And just quick question while you're pulling up, what are you shooting with? What's your weapon of choice?
So I usually keep, I have a Leica M4P that I usually keep with me pretty much all the time. Let me share it right. There we go. Okay. And that's what I keep with me pretty much all the time. So I'll show you guys, this is a work that I'd made, I actually forget what year this was, maybe 2013, 14, something like that. I think I completed it. And I basically made a small body of work, a street work, basically on people in New York City, very much inspired by Frank's The Americans and kind of doing it on a smaller scale to some degree, with a very limited geographical place. So these were a couple of spreads from it. And so the idea was that I felt that there were a lot of stories in the city that can be observed and learned from if you just kind of take time to pause. And being a person who, was not raised in New York City, but then, has since called New York City home, and it is certainly home for me. I feel like I'm able to kind of get a bit of the best of both worlds, and that I'm able to navigate and feel comfortable and feel at home in the city, but also realize some of the things that maybe you take for granted if you have been surrounded by it forever. So I think like New York has this funny way of you can get real tunnel vision. It's like, all right, I got to get to work. I got to not miss this train. Right. Who's holding the doors? What's going on? Kind of thing.
Are these images full screen on your side? Because on our side, we're just seeing thumbnail size images.
Let's see. Is this just showing a thumbnail?
Hit Option L. That will slideshow it.
It's still showing thumbnail?
Maybe it's Command L.
Yep, we're still got.
I think you have to open it
here.
before you actually share your screen. You might have to unshare and then share again.
Right, that's what I was going to say. In Bridge, you got to open it and then you got to share it. Otherwise, just open everything in preview.
Okay, let's try that. As you can see, I am a film shooter and not the most prolific technology person.
Well, at least you're not picking up your camera and going, just look, here it is.
Here's some film for you guys. Let me just pull it up this other way, and I think that'll be better. This would be a better way to show. All right. Almost there.
Almost there. While Lorena's doing that, I'll just shoot a question at you very quickly, Quasi. Someone from S. Krupp that she really likes the way you crowd the frame in some of your shots with people. Can you talk about what you do to capture the energy of the street, whether it's in shots with people or without? You're muted.
There we go. Yeah, that's my thing.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think that, a lot of it is just kind of being there and just kind of watching things unfold. I mean, the energy is there, and I think that if you're out there, and a lot of people that photograph street kind of hint at something like this too, you really do start to develop a knack of capturing a moment, or at least anticipating moments. And I think that that's one of the things that I just rely on. A lot of my stuff is just kind of trusting my gut. So crowding the frames or whatnot, you know, just positioning myself in a way where I know everyone's going to intersect at one point. That's kind of my only real technique is just practicing that a lot.
Nice. Loren, how
All right,
we
I think we
doing?
got it. I think we got it here.
Good. Okay.
All right, is
Hey,
that
there we
better?
are.
There we
Yeah,
go.
that's
Yes, that's
looking good.
fantastic. All right, good. Tell me about this.
Yeah, so this is actually the first image that I put in the zine. Started with this short little essay, but I basically want to explore the idea that there's so many moments and there's so many occurrences that are happening around us in the city that often go unnoticed, ignored, or you just don't even really think about them because you're in your own world. You're always trying to get somewhere. It's obviously the city that never sleeps, and that energy is so beautiful and it's intoxicating, but it also can cause you to become a little tunnel visioned, and you can forget that every moment happening next to you is someone else trying to make it as well. So that was what I wanted to do with this, was kind of created a moment, an idea of if you pause and look around, there's so much to see and think about and wonder, like each of these people in these frames, what is their story and what is the moment that they're coming from and trying to get to.
So in a shot like this with the guy sitting on the railing here, just hold back for a second there. When you see this, does the geometry jump out to you first? Is it the person, like what caught your eye in this scene first?
I think this one, this is the train that I would catch when I was leaving my then girlfriend, my now wife's home. And so I knew this path and I was familiar with it. So I don't think I necessarily thought about the geometry at the moment that I was taking this picture, but I was also familiar with the space and the idea that there was this geometry. So at this moment, I was thinking more about this man sitting on this bench, just, in this repose, but also it seems it could be a bit of resignation. And it's the idea of wondering what brought him to that moment. And then also the idea that there's other people just moving along and moving past. And then myself, I'm going to be that guy on the steps in, 20 seconds, moving past and continuing on and not really considering, if I didn't take this photo, what's happening with the people around me here. So I think it's a combination of a lot of the spaces were familiar to me. So the geometry, some of the lines, some of the, framing elements were already there. But for me, it's usually more about a moment of life that I see that sparks the idea of capturing that picture in that space.
Let's see some more.
I just like the idea that it says saga and life is such a saga.
Yeah.
This is a full spread.
Have you ever considered shooting color, or it's always been black and white for you?
I primarily shoot black and white just because I like my usual goal is basically to kind of get down to the human element of something. And I find that the black and white gives me the best chance to kind of strip away and get to that. I also like the idea of trying to pull out time to some degree, not so much going for it looks old, but rather creating a space where you could place it in some other time, space, or what have you, and still find the human elements connected in it,
Right. And I have same questions here with this this rabbi. Let's go back to that for a second. So again, the questions are always for me, what did you see first?
Right. I think, and it's funny, I'm trying to remember exactly what I saw first, but I think I remember seeing this sign in this backdrop, and it's almost at a very near moment, seeing the rabbi approaching and liking the idea of the juxtaposition that's forced by a place like New York City. Like you have very different environments that everybody's forced to traverse, no matter what your, inclinations are. And the idea that it kind of mashes everything together, and everybody just has to navigate that, no matter where you're coming from or where you're going.
Right.
The city doesn't stop. You're in that.
Really great shot.
So yeah, that was
Let's see what's next.
That was or this body of work was this kind of broad overview of New York City characters.
Okay, this is a great shot.
And then some of them eventually were precursors to what ultimately became Enough.
Can we talk about that for a second?
Yeah.
So,
for instance,
is this work from Enough?
this is actually an image that
still,
also was in Enough.
I thought it was, yeah. It looked familiar. So tell me about how you came to the decision that it needed to be a book, and then how you went about bringing together the images. If you can show us some of the work from those pages.
Yeah, let me do a stop share and see if I can get it to share properly here. Okay, perfect.
While you're searching, let me throw another. Go ahead.
So Enough came about because as I was making this particular work, I started to think about the particular story and the experience of Blackness in New York City, and the idea that it's particularly as I was a person that was navigating and shooting work in my environments on my way to different places. I thought about how most of my interactions in particular spaces were of my community, of Black community, Black friends, that sort of thing. And the idea that for some people that's sort of a foreign concept. So I wanted to create, and also I didn't feel that that had really been presented. The idea of being able to tell a very singular Black story in New York City from the perspective of street photography specifically. There's enough here. Is that share fine? Everybody can see that?
Yes, yeah, we got it.
Okay, good. So I wanted to tell the specific story of Blackness in the city, and by getting more specific as far as the type of experience, I wanted to also delve more into the human element of that. So it wasn't sort of a characterization of the experience or anything like that. I wanted to really be able to capture the regular sort of quotidian, which I always screw up the pronunciation of the word, the regular moments. But I felt that if I got human enough, that the experience would be universal and you could find yourself in that no matter what. So even though it's a very Black experience, and even though it's even a very specific experience, like all of these photos are from one of the 5 boroughs, and they're almost actually mostly in Brooklyn, you can still find experience relating to if you live in Seattle or Los Angeles or Virginia or what have you.
So I want to tell everyone who's watching, listening, if you can put any questions that you might have into our group chat, I can, kind of cherry pick from those. And Laurent, you can just kind of scroll through a few images here, and if there's something in particular that you love that you really want us to see, and then we'll field a few questions before we start to wind up.
So I guess I'll start with this first one. This is the image that I start the book with. And the reason I wanted to start it with this was, number one, I think that everything sort of is built on a foundation of youth, and that everything that will come later is being grown now kind of idea. So I thought it was important to start with an image of Black youth, because that is the future of what will be happening and what we'll be experiencing throughout our community and throughout the world. And this image was interesting to me because it's, if you look at the image, you can see, okay, it's clearly Halloween. She has this little skeleton costume on, which is a marker and an image of death, but she is having the time of her life. She is, she's basically flipping. She's having a great time. So I was thinking about that juxtaposition of the idea that, what is often put on people as a marker of struggle or death or what have you. And this is also, created in a time where we're seeing so many images and videos of Black death. So in a time where Blackness is often associated with that for a lot of people, that there's still this ability to float and find joy, in it. So that was why I thought it was important to start with that image. And then a friend of mine, Cyrus Aaron, was able to contribute a really wonderful essay to start. So folks may recognize this one. This is one of the images that's in the show. And this is, again, this is a street about maybe 6 blocks from my house, a street that another friend of mine lived on, and I was walking up to his house for a barbecue. So, you know, he lives down this block. So as I'm walking, I just see this kid with the football. And this is kind of to answer one of your earlier questions. This is the instance where I really only saw the kid initially with the ball, and I just loved that moment. And then as I looked back, I saw that there was like these other little things that made it even more interesting. You know, he's got this texting on this text on his shirt, the idea that he has these kind of like 2 large sandals, and then of course the heart that's, you know, painted onto the ground. I love the idea of the juxtaposition of, you know, the heart, but all this harsh concrete, even the strong light kind of thing was interesting to me.
Yeah.
And so actually in the book, I used vehicles as sort of a turning point for particular, I guess, energy sections, if you will. Mm-hmm. And so there were 4 vehicles in the book, and each vehicle sort of precedes a section that I thought had a particular cohesiveness and a certain type of vibration, I guess, if you will, between the images. But I wanted them all to still kind of flow. So if you look through the book, I think you'll see that there's moments where after the car, the vibe changes just ever so slightly.
It's really
and the other thing that was important for me in this book was I wanted all of the images to basically only feature Black subjects, but not in a way that was exclusive, as if I was cropping people out or anything like that, because I feel like that's what the Black experience can very much be like in New York City, but also just in the States, is that you have your friends, your family, your community that you grow with and that supports you and everything. And it often just so happens to be that the people that you rely on and count on surrounding you are all Black people. And I didn't feel like I'd really seen that communicated in an artistic photo book, particularly from a street photography view, before.
So let's open this up for a second, because we just have a few minutes left. Let's bring Quasi back in. This is amazing work, man. And if we have the link for Laurent's book, that'd be great to put into the group chat. I guess maybe like a couple of questions before we go. In coming to this exhibition, one of the goals of LACP was, if you know anything about Los Angeles, where LACP is now located has been, a predominantly Black neighborhood for a long time. And there was a great deal of a conscious effort around making sure that, we had, Black voices, in this space. And what has been your larger, and Quasi, this is for you as well, what has been your larger experience around, interacting with institutions around, this content that comes from this perspective? Have you had successes? Have you had pushback? Do you have advice? How's it been for both of you?
I'll take it first. Honestly, for me, being a predominantly landscape photographer, but also being a Black street photographer, which is something I think that kind of is a thread that binds all of us, all 3 of us. It's been a mixed bag, actually. I mean, there's not a lot of, I don't see a lot of Black landscape photographers out there, and I always wondered why. And it's because, at least in my experience, the more I have put stuff out, I've gotten a great reception to a ton of stuff. I mean, without a doubt. But also at the same time, it's like, I feel like there should be a lot more because I've never been the only person doing this. You know what I'm saying? Like I can rattle off like 5 or 6 other Black landscape photographers in LA.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like
right.
That are really good. That I've been fortunate in some attention to come to my work, but as far as larger institutions, I don't necessarily I don't see as much of it as I should. And with street photography, it's even more kind of micro focused, because I feel like one of the vibes in street photography as a whole is you see Black and brown bodies in front of the lens, but you never really see, or not as much as I feel like there should be, more parity in Black and brown bodies behind the lens. You know, I mean, you know, the right to interpret the world and having your perspective valued is something that I feel like there's a long way to go.
Yeah. What about you, Lauren?
Right.
How's your experience
Yeah,
been?
I'd agree.
Yeah.
I'd agree. I mean, I
So,
think one thing particularly in this time is that I think a lot of people, when they're thinking of Black artists, street photography, their mind often goes straight to like protest work. And, you know, I think the idea is that we need to make sure that the experience is fully realized, and that, you know, one of the oldest actually images in the book is from a protest, but there's so much more to the Black photographic experience than that. And in a grander sense, there's so much more to the Black experience than protest and, you know, fighting for survival. That's why I made this book particularly, was because I wanted to show like we're more than, and we're enough when we're just living, and we're not just always fighting and protesting and having our fists up and marching and shouting and yelling and being sad and hurt and angry. So I think that's been my experience, that the view has to be widened a little bit, and the expectations have to change.
Totally agree.
well, I think that the work both you guys are doing is really amazing. You know, and I'm really inspired by it. You're both on Instagram. Uh, I put Quasi's handle in there. Lauren, what's your Instagram? You can just tell people.
Oh yeah, it's Chevalier Creative.
Chevalier Creative Instagram. That's where you are. I'm
Definitely.
hoping we can find put the link for the book in the group chat. Any final thoughts? Any final words before we hand it back off to Julia?
I
And
just
I'm
like,
just
oh, no, go ahead, Lauren.
it's like the classic Zoom moment, right? And I'm honored to be in such a group of, you know, really tremendous creators and seers of the world. So it's really dope, and it's really great to be back in the West too, even if it's only digitally. So I'm appreciative of the platform, and I'm excited to see what everyone's able to do moving forward.
Yeah, and
We
honestly,
look forward to seeing you out here.
and I just echo.
Yeah.
I'm really thankful to be a part of the exhibition, and you know, discovering the work of everyone else in the show has been really incredible too. And yeah, I'm just really thankful for the platform. Really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you guys' time. You both have fantastic work. Julia, I guess it's
Thank you
back
for
on
moderating,
you.
man. Appreciate it.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank you. I'm glad I had the opportunity to do it, man. This is really exciting.
Much appreciated.
Thank you,
Julia?
Ali. Thank you, Ali, so much for moderating this wonderful event, and Quasi and Laurent. It was a great pleasure to meet you, see you, and see your inspiring work and hear you talk about it. Thank you all again for being here. We have 4 more Tuesdays of Say What You Want to Say coming up every week at 4 o'clock between now and September 15th. So all the information is on our website if you want to see more. And I so hope to see you all again soon. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay. Hi, Sandy. Bye, guys.
Bye, Julia. Thanks.
Thank you.